there was noise outside. But yeah, so I went to watch the Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny movie. This is the first Indiana Jones film that I've ever watched in its entirety. The only other film that I remember watching a tiny snippet of on TV when they were doing reruns was when I was in like elementary school, and I think it was from like the Temple of Doom or something. I don't know. Something with the word temple in it where Indiana Jones fights off a group of Aztecs or something. I'm sorry if I'm butchering the historical lore there, but yeah, it was like some indigenous tribe. The leader was trying to kill him, and then I just distinctly remember this really scary scene of like him cutting out somebody's heart, either cutting out someone's heart or like reaching in to grab his still beating heart out, which I'm sure if I rewatched now as an adult, it would be really camp and funny to me. And even back then, right, I'm sure that's how the tone of the movie was supposed to be. But to an elementary school aged me, it was pretty traumatizing. And so that's why, part of the reason why I've never watched any other Indiana Jones films since. Aside from the fact that it was just not really on my radar. And yeah, but this time around, I don't know, I just felt like an urge to go to the theater, even though it's Thursday. Well, technically it's Friday, 1 a.m. But yeah, I just felt like I was in the mood to go watch something. And the Barbie movie's not coming out until August 11th in Tokyo, so I really had no other choice. It was either this or the Super Mario Brothers movie dubbed over in Japanese, which I was definitely not gonna do. I don't do dubs, I do subtitles. Like, no matter which language the film is originally acted in, I prefer to hear it in the original language and then read subtitles if it's not English. So yeah, I went to see it, and holy crap, am I glad. Like, I feel like this was the best decision I made all week. So glad that I decided to go with my gut feeling and see it on a whim. And I'll tell you, actually, like, on hindsight, or in hindsight, I think I know why. I think I know what factor pushed me to go like out on a limb and just watch this movie of this franchise that I've never had any sort of passing interest in whatsoever for my whole life. And it's because of the fact that when I found out that Harrison Ford was 80 years old and doing a live action, like, not just a like live action film, obviously that's his job as an actor, but like a proper, an actual action movie, you know, where there's crazy stunts and fight scenes. Like, at 80 years old, I feel like that is unheard of. That must be some sort of world record. Or I don't know if they would give an award for that kind of thing, but 80 years old though, and he's doing like all of those stunts and the car chases and like all. I'm sure he has stunt doubles, but it's just, yeah, it's unheard of to me. Because even Tom Cruise was 60 in Top Gun 2, so that makes it look like Tom Cruise is a baby, right? Like, Harrison Ford is out here at 80, doing an Indiana Jones sequel. And I almost, like, honestly, when I left the theater, I was really hoping, it really got my hopes up that we were going to see more of this new kind of new generation adventures of Indiana Jones, but I feel like the guy's literally 80, so maybe I shouldn't get my hopes up, you know? Not that, like, we're hoping for the best. Everyone should live over 100 years old, but yeah, we have to be realistic. And also, like, even if he's around to do the movie, it's not going to be able to be at this scale of, like, action and stuntsmanship. But anyway, so that was, like, it might sound weird, but that was the big push that drove me to go see this movie. The fact that Harrison Ford is 80 years old and like still out here doing the huge classic, like, leading man movie star thing on the big screen. I just feel like it's inspiring, you know, because you know me, I don't like it. I don't like ageism at all, and I don't like it when people who are like really young talk as if they're old or as if their life is almost over. Like, people have been talking that way ever since high school, like, literally. So I remember my friends in high school, some of them when we were like all turning 16, like every single year, every milestone age, 16, 18, 21, there would be someone that said like, "Oh, I'm getting old now." And even though it's a joke, I feel like you shouldn't speak things like that into your life, you know? Like every joke is 50% truth in it. So as for me, I never like to speak that kind of energy into my life. I feel like it's just pointless, you know, like age is just a number, and I don't like the focus on, like, I just don't see the point of, okay, I turned a certain number of years in my age, so now that means that my life is over or that I can't do certain things. That logic just never made sense to me. It always sounded like an excuse, to be honest, which is what it was. So I guess, you know, let's pat the young, resourceful me on the back for recognizing this early. But I feel like, yeah, that was just something that I never appreciated, like back then, now, forever. Whenever people would make a big deal of, oh, I'm too old, or, you know, even if they're saying it in a joking way, it's like, I know you're not joking though, because you're using it as an excuse to like not go after the thing that you want, or because you're lazy, essentially. Like, you don't, you want a get out of jail free card. Like, instead of having to admit that you're just lazy and you lack motivation, you get to use the age thing as an excuse to blame it on. And so then you don't have to take personal accountability. That's my take on it. And so that's why, like, yeah, it might sound weird, but and like I know for most people who are going to see this film, it's probably the nostalgia factor, right? Like they probably grew up with the character and they were fans of the original films. But for me, like I said, this is the first time I've ever seen an Indiana Jones movie, and I was just really inspired by the fact that Harrison Ford is 80 years old and still out here doing the damn thing. Although let's not like overly idolize Harrison Ford. You guys know me. I'm not like that with celebrities. I don't get star fever. I can honestly say, like I can legitimately say, if I ended up in a room or next to any celebrity, even someone that I'm a fan of, like if we were in the same room together, if I happened to be next to them or meet them, I would genuinely not be like, obviously it would be an exciting thing, but I don't know if I should say this, but okay, you guys aren't gonna misinterpret me, right? Like I would see it as an opportunity for me, if anything, that I could, well, it sounds bad if I say that I can get clout off of them, but that would be where my mind goes first. And I feel like that's the healthy way to think about it, because like you shouldn't think about how celebrities as people being on this pedestal. They are just humans like you and me. They have the same like flesh, blood, and bones. We're all made of the same stuff. We're all made of stardust. So I feel like, yeah, I would be excited, but I would never, I don't know, I just don't have the fan energy. I have main character energy. What can I say? Like I don't have fan energy or a fan mentality, and I've always been that way. So like, why am I saying this? Oh, Harrison Ford, yeah, because I know that people like idolize him, and especially because he came from that kind of golden era of really, you know, he's like the face of Hollywood, right? He's like a classic Hollywood leading man, and I don't want to take anything away from him. Obviously, I think like this movie is no exception in proving his phenomenal acting skills and his dedication to the craft. But let's not forget, you know, you guys remember that Carrie Fisher came out with her autobiography right before she sadly passed away too early, in my opinion, but where she revealed that when she was 19, Harrison Ford basically like sucked her into having an affair with him while they were filming the original Star Wars, which like, yes, she was an adult at that time, so of course she bears some responsibility in that, but I always felt like that story really rubbed me the wrong way, because he was basically like a 33-year-old grown man with a wife and kids, so most of the responsibility, like he's the one that's married, so I feel like most of the responsibility lies with him. And I do feel like there was an element of, I'm not gonna say that he was a predator or anything, but I do feel there was definitely an element of him taking advantage of her at such a young, impressionable age. And like, no matter, even though he's never really, he kind of addressed it publicly, I think, so I do, whatever, I guess I respect that, but it took him a while and he never went into detail, which is like, obviously it's to be expected, but I just don't like the whole, and I don't like the whole story that they tried to paint about how he was actually like trying to protect her from because the thing is that she was 19 and she was like new in the industry. Although she's also kind of a nepo baby, right? Weren't her parents really famous and prominent in the industry to begin with? So that part of the story also kind of confuses me, because I feel like you would have more protection naturally if you came from a line of people that already worked in Hollywood. But I don't know. Apparently, I guess everyone has their own circumstances, right? I think Drew Barrymore is another example of this. Like, she also had kind of famous actor slash director, whatever, parents, but she was also thrust into like this really adult, fast, like drug fueled, whatever lifestyle when she was really young. And so maybe the same thing happened with Carrie Fisher. But yeah, I don't like how they painted the narrative. I don't know if it was like Ford himself or probably someone from his camp, like his PR team for sure, that was making it seem like, when they were shooting the movie and like they were having the after work parties, they made it seem that the crew, like some the middle-aged guys in the movie crew, were trying to get her drunk and like possibly to take advantage of her, and she was only 19. So they made it seem like Harrison Ford was this big hero that kind of swooped in and like protected her. I think he took her away in a cab or something, but then he ended up like kissing her, which I don't think is necessarily. Anyway, that's not what this that's not what this live is about. But I say all that to say, like, let's not. I mean, I liked Harrison Ford in this movie, and I feel like for the most part, his personal life aside, I don't think he's had anything like super controversial on his record. So whatever, I'll give him a pass. And I did really enjoy his acting in this movie. But yeah, I really like this movie overall. Like, I think that people on the internet are just so miserable. Or I guess it has to be the sense of possessiveness that people have, especially over, if you were a fan of the original movie, I can see how you would be possessive over the original storyline and the original vibe of the series. And so, but like, I just feel like people on the whole get way too bent out of shape. Like, it's a story, okay? And then like a lot of people took issue with obviously, the new younger female lead, who is, I think her name is Helena, and she is the goddaughter supposedly of Indiana Jones, which is apparently a new character that they never introduced before. I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like her father was a professor that was one of Indiana Jones's best friends and comrades, and then after he like passed away, a lot of other stuff happened, time passed, and Indiana Jones also, his his whole life is kind of in shambles when we start the story. Hold on, let me take a sip of water. But maybe, okay, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. So let me try to gather my thoughts. So the first thing that I was really impressed about with this movie is that I think that like I always knew, I had kind of an idea of the genre that Indiana Jones films were, even though I never watched the other movies. I always knew that it was mostly focused on, heavy on the action adventure portion, right? And then where they use like well-known historical relics or events in history, and then they loosely base it on real things that happened in history, but then they kind of spin this fantastical fictional story out of it, right? And then so like for the most part, it's supposed to be like a fun escapist adventure film. And so I think that like, so in this movie, spoiler alert, he's fighting against, he and this former Nazi commander or soldier turned scientist who's working for NASA in the US, which apparently is also, it's kind of loosely based on like a real story of a former Nazi that kind of contributed to the United States space program. So I like that they kept, you know, kind of a messy part of US history in there. But then so that's his main nemesis in this movie, and they're both trying to get to this device, which I already forget what it's called. It starts with an A. It's like a time travel device almost that was made by this ancient Greek philosopher who I'm also blanking on the name now. But yeah, so they have to. It's like the opening sequence is back in, you know, like the 1940s. He and his professor buddy Boz, the who is the father of his goddaughter, right? Who becomes like his sidekick and kind of the one of the main characters in this movie. They are like on the run. No, like they, I don't know if they were captured. No, I think they were captured, right, by the Nazis, and then they were. Is this video gonna get completely buried because I said Nazi like 20 times by now? Um, but yeah, so they're like held in captivity on this Nazi train, and then they're like trying to recover some sword but that was used to kill Christ. But then they find out that the sword is a fake. So the actual artifact that's of real value on the train is one half of this clock time machine like device that is in the possession of the Nazi scientist, who I'm gonna look up his name right now because he's played by Mads Mikkelsen, who I love, by the way. Even though I know he's a Nazi in this movie, okay? Like, don't twist my words, but I'm just saying Mads Mikkelsen, okay? The actor. I was never like not happy when he was on screen. Let's put it that way. Dial of Destiny. Voller, I think his name. Yeah, Voller. Jürgen Voller. Okay, yeah, Jürgen Voller. And then his alias is Schmidt, right? Like Dr. Schmidt, the professor or the scientist. And so I think, okay, stick to the point, Ren. The first thing that really impressed me is that there's a difference between like a film that would be like a real Holocaust or war-centered film, right? Like a film that is very clearly like a drama, historical drama that has a very somber tone to it. There's a difference between that and like something that is focused around the same events in history and also committed in a sense to making it seem realistic, but also not taking it as dark as the actual historical war film would, if that makes sense. So I feel like they did a really good job of making it like very suspenseful, very tense. You can feel that, okay, this was like a really nasty period in history, but they stop just short of really making you sick to your stomach the way that an actual Holocaust film would, if that makes sense. And I felt like, but they managed to do it to where it's like still it still feels serious, I guess because the acting and the direction is so good, but it's not like it doesn't mess you up completely psychologically. You know what I mean? So that part, I don't even know if I'm describing this well, but that really, really impressed me because I didn't walk away from this film feeling particularly like sickened or, you know, disturbed, even though I do feel like there was a lot of action and violence. It was actually a lot more than I expected, to be honest. Okay, so it wasn't more than I expected because I have that one scene of Indiana Jones like reaching into that guy's chest and pulling out his beating heart. Please tell me somebody like what movie exactly that's from. But yeah, that's the only thing I remember from Indiana Jones as a child. And so like I know that okay, this is more, I mean, I think this one, The Dial of Destiny, is rated PG-13. So I know it's not, even though it's Disney, I know it's not like Disney Princess arena, but it's also not like, you know, Schindler's List or something, right? But I was surprised though, I have to say, by the amount of people dying and like people just the amount of killing that goes in this movie, you know, and the amount of violent off-screen stuff that happens. Like there's a lot of loud, actiony, violent scenes, but they only show just enough so that it doesn't, again, it doesn't make you like completely sick to your stomach, which is why I often avoid these types of films. But even for me, I felt like it was manageable. But I was still very surprised though, like, because there's one scene where like this kid, there's this teenage sidekick boy that his godfather, or no, his Indiana Jones's goddaughter befriends this kid, and they're kind of like partners in crime. And he gets captured by the Germans, and then they drag him through like the forest with them to try to get to some ancient tomb earlier than Indiana Jones and his goddaughter can get to it. And then the kid like gets handcuffed to one of the henchmen, and then he pulls him like into the river while they're crossing the bridge. And then the kid literally, okay, so spoiler alert, like the kid manages to unlock the handcuffs underwater, and then he locks the handcuffs to like this metal gate that's stuck under the river while it's also still connected to the henchman. So he basically, like, this teenage minor kid commits murder and it's just not painted as a big deal in the movie. It's also not a big deal that like I think, you know, earlier on in the movie, before the kid commits murder, they go to Sicily, I think, where they meet up with I think it was Antonio Banderas. I don't know the character's name, sorry, but it's like Indiana Jones's old friend who is a professional diver who like takes them out to sea on his boat to help them go dive underwater at the site of a shipwreck to get like this stone tablet thing that is supposed to tell them the directions of where to find the other half of the time machine thing. And then like while they're underwater for only 3 minutes, right? Because that's how long that their equipment can last for. While they're under there, the Germans, again, they like pop up out of nowhere and they overtake the boat and they just murder everyone on deck. So yeah, that was a little bit jarring, but I don't know if that's a normal thing with this entire franchise. I feel like I'm missing someone. Oh yeah, and then like the CIA girl too, the one with the afro, like she had really good fashion. She had like very colorful outfits. I was really digging her vibe. But then she also, like when they're up in the plane with Voller and his associates, Voller, like the Germans overthrow the CIA agents and they're like throwing them out of the plane, and then they shoot like that lady, and it's just like, oh, okay. No regard for human life whatsoever. But I guess in the world of Indiana Jones, it's fine as long as the main characters are there. Um what else? Yeah, so people were complaining about how they made Indiana Jones like a really, really grumpy, sad character. People, I think this is actually a valid complaint. So again, I don't have any context. I didn't have any context with the previous movies until after I watched this one, and then I just did a little bit of light reading before this live. But like apparently he had a son, and his son enlisted into the Vietnam War, and he got lost his life in combat. So, and then after that, his marriage kind of fell apart. And so he's basically like, when we catch up with him in this movie, he's like this old professor that's teaching, what is it, archaeology, that, and you know, the kids in his class are like falling asleep. He doesn't really have anyone in his life. He's living in this downtrodden, you know, very basic, I wouldn't say like, I mean, it looked like a decent place, but a very basic, like humble apartment in New York City on a teacher's salary, right? And it's just like a very, very somber place. You can see like his face, his entire body is like very weathered and old. So there were people complaining that it was just way too depressing. Like, why would you do indie like that? And I kind of see, yeah, I kind of see where they're coming from, especially after learning that. Cause see, I didn't know. I thought like maybe his son dying was something that had already happened in the previous storylines of the previous movies, but apparently not. Like apparently this entire backstory was just invented for the Dial of Destiny movie. So I can see how people will take issue with that. And then it does, I feel like in the beginning when we first meet his goddaughter, whose name is Helena, I feel like in the beginning it does kind of add insult to injury because she basically tricks him, right? Like she, oh, but I want to say though, like people who are saying really nasty things about the actress, Phoebe Wallace something, I think is her name. I feel like those people need to get a grip and a life. Like it's called acting, so she was doing her best with whatever script they gave her. So the people who are like saying that she was the reason that the movie was a failure or that the movie was super annoying, like people who were complaining about her character being super annoying, I feel like, do you not have any critical thinking skills whatsoever? Like, how do you not know that this is a character invented by someone that she's simply doing her job by inhabiting? So anyway, I feel like it's just so obvious. How do you even argue with people that are being so petty about how they hate her character? Like, that is the entire point. You're supposed to not like her. I think, in the beginning when she does like very um undeniably untasteful things in the beginning of the movie, right? Like she's basically sweet talking this, her old depressed godfather, and she's like pulling on his heartstrings, pulling on his nostalgia of the past and his like fond memories of her father to gain his trust so that she can ultimately swindle him out of the artifact so that she can sell it for a lot of money, right? Because that's what she does. She's like basically a black market antiques dealer. And so that was like her next target, Indiana Jones, because she knew that her father, like she was there the night that Indiana Jones took the dial from her father. She was like 12 years old, but then she plays stupid when she first talks to Indy, right? She says that, "Oh, I don't really remember what happened, but like, we should go on an adventure again. We should go find the second half." And she's selling this fantasy to him about, "Hey, let's go on an adventure, like I'm interested in this because this is what you and my dad went through so much trouble to recover this artifact." And then she does all that, and it's a great setup because like I even believed her. Like I completely bought the whole act, hook, line, and sinker, until this one moment when they're in the library where it was a literal shift of her eyes where I got the sense that that was all I needed to see to know that, oh, okay, it seems like she's not up to no good. And I feel like that is the mark of great acting, right? Because I can pinpoint the exact moment where I knew that, okay, she has something up her sleeve. And I knew that she wasn't necessarily going to be like the full on bad guy in this movie, but they were definitely setting her up to be, what's the word? Like a foil to Indiana Jones. But then I thought that she went through kind of like a very clear, a very satisfying character arc, in my opinion, throughout the whole movie. Like she gets, in the beginning, she's very like, she comes off very cutthroat, very, just, what's the word? Like a grifter, right? A swindler. She's like taking advantage of an old man and his vulnerabilities and using them to basically just make herself rich. But it's not the worst thing in the world, right? You can kind of put yourself in her shoes. Like she, her father, I don't know exactly how he died, but I feel like it's implied that it has something to do with, I mean, he went mad essentially, right? Like he kind of lost his senses. He became obsessed with researching this dial of destiny. He became obsessed with the idea of being able to time travel. And so, he died not really getting any answers or getting any fruits for all the fruits for his labor, all of the stuff that he went through with Indy. So I feel like it makes a lot of sense. Like you can see where her motivations come from, that okay, my dad kind of wasted my life and I don't want his legacy, like I don't want his work to go to waste. So I'm going to be much more ruthless than he was about it, right? Like I'm just going to go in there and take what's mine. And so I feel like that sense, like even though the actions that she chooses to take initially are not that savory, I feel like her motivation is very, very relatable. And Yeah, it's like your misogyny is showing. I'm sorry, but I'm saying this as somebody that I also did not like her as a character at first, but then slowly, I have to admit, she really started to grow on me. And I feel like that's a testament to this actress's skills, okay? And you cannot, like, you cannot criticize that just because you don't like the character. But I like the character. I feel like she had a great arc, and you know, by the end, it was really like I was crying by the end. Honestly, there were a few scenes in this movie that got actual tears from my eyes, which is more than we can say for The Little Mermaid. And what else did I watch? Spider-Man. I didn't cry during The Little Mermaid, even though you would think that that's the movie that is more up my alley than this one. But hey, there was great. I feel like there was great, like, emotional acting in the Indiana Jones movie. So yeah, like at the end when they meet oh my god, what's his name? The Greek philosopher Archimedes? Archimedes? Antikythera. That's the name of the time travel device, the dial of destiny. And then yeah, it was the creator of the Antikythera. It was the Greek philosopher Archimedes, who they actually like travel back in time to meet, because basically, like, long story short, Jurgen Voller, I'm just gonna call him Mads, Mads Mikkelsen, um, steals the device, and he's taking them all back to like 1939 Germany so that he can kill Hitler, so that he can become the leader of the Nazi forces, because he believes that, knowing what he knows now, he could basically lead the Nazi troops to victory, because he wouldn't make the same mistakes as Hitler. So yeah, Jurgen takes them through like a time fisher thing, but then instead of ending up in 1939, they end up in like 200 BC, Archimedes time, and it's later revealed that that's the only place that the dial was built to bring people anyway. Like, it was not this like time calculator device that they thought, where you could line it up with, you know, any time frame of or any moment in history. It was solely built to take them back to Archimedes' time, because Archimedes himself was trying to, I don't know, like, call in people from the future or aliens or whatever. So yeah, like during that scene when Indy's like, okay, you know what? I actually want to stay here because there's nothing left for me. If I go back to the future, what is left there for me? Like, who am I even living for? You know, my wife left me, my son passed, like, I don't have anything. Nobody appreciates me. You know, he actually, I think in the beginning of the movie, it's his last day on the job, so he retires. And even like the students that he has, they're all the young people in the university that he's teaching at, they're all looking towards the future. No one's interested in looking at the past or learning about history, right? Which is what his specialty is. So I feel like that part was very gut-wrenching for me too, where like you can totally see how he was like, you know what, this is gonna be it for me. I'm just gonna stay here. But then his goddaughter, Helena, is like, no, are you insane? Like, you have to come back. You belong in the present with us, right? You belong in the future with us. And, like, that scene was very... And then she punches him in the end. So, I already said spoiler alert, right? Sorry if you were looking forward to watching it for yourself. But, yeah, she punches him because he's, like, not giving up this idea that he's just gonna stay here in 200 BC. And she's like, no, we have to get you back to the future. That part kind of annoyed me, because like after that it just fades into Indiana Jones waking up in a hospital, not even a hospital bed, it was his own bed, but he's like bandaged up, right? Because oh yeah, like he got shot in the heart too, but then somehow didn't die. We'll just ignore that part. Yeah, so I kind of like, I wanted to see them get back on the plane and make it back through the rip in time space before the window closed, but they kind of just skipped that whole thing. So I was like, oh, okay, I guess that's fine. That's sufficient. Um, but yeah, like by the end of the film, I feel like she definitely she really fleshes out as a character. Like she softens, and you know, by that point they had already both they had saved each other a bunch of times. The only thing that I was kind of confused about, actually, I will say I do think that the like I heard that they had a lot of issues editing the raw footage for this movie because apparently they wanted it to have like a certain tone at first, but then I think the focus group that they showed it to was really not into the whole like girl boss, new female girl boss version of Indiana Jones, so they kind of had to downplay that aspect and give the actual Indiana Jones a little more weight in the overall story, which I think is the way to go. But as a result of that, it feels like they had to go back and re-edit a lot of the raw footage to really like force it to work. So I will say I did feel a little bit of that because there was just some parts that didn't exactly flow seamlessly with each other. Like for example, when they're talking in the library in the beginning and Indy first reveals the Antikythera, the half that he had taken for safekeeping from her father, and then they're like at the same time those German and CIA agents are surrounding the library and listening in on their conversation, like waiting for their chance to pounce on them. And then like when um when Indy realizes that Helena has kind of been pulling the wool over his eyes this whole time, and he realizes that she's bluffing him, like he gets really mad all of a sudden, right? And he's like, okay, what are you really doing here? Like, what's your goal? And that's when the CIA agents also reveal themselves. But then she literally like locks him into she slams this gate door thing in his face, and she literally locks him in there with the agents. So that part I was very confused because, and then he even says too, he's like, who are these people, are they with you? And that's, so I was thinking like, oh my goodness, is she like working with the Germans, or like is she literally working with the enemy against her own godfather? But it turns out that that was not the case, right? Like the three parties, Indiana Jones, Helena, and then the Voller and his cohorts, are three separate parties. But then I was kind of confused as to why she would just leave her old 80-year-old godfather in the library with these people that clearly just shot like other people in the department seconds earlier. Why would you do that? So it's like I'm hoping that that's not the message that they were sending, because that is kind of messed up, I will admit, because it kind of sends the message that she really didn't care whether or not they killed her godfather. And I really want to believe that that's not the case. Like, even though she was very selfish and just money motivated and she wanted to just get her antique and get out of there, I would hope that she wasn't heartless enough to just leave him as a literal casualty. But I think, like, yeah, as the movie progressed, it's clear that that was not representative of her feelings, of her true feelings towards Indy, because they definitely like start to have each other's back more throughout the film. But anyway, what else? I feel like I'm missing something. The kid felt random to me as well, but I liked him. I mean, I thought he was a really good actor too. Like, I was impressed with his acting chops. But I was confused that he didn't seem to have parents or guardians that cared that he was like leaving and going to different continents, hopping around all the time. Mads Mikkelsen, though. I love Mads Mikkelsen. Even as like even as a Nazi scientist, he wasn't as, yeah, so like the thing, I feel like he gave, I don't know if it's just because I like Mads, but I feel like he gave a very sympathetic spin to the villain. Like, even though you never once in the movie feel like you're rooting for the villain, but you definitely feel like a humanity from him. It's not just this cold two-dimensional like evil Nazi character trying to ruin the world. You can see like you can see his thought process, and it makes sense, right? Because he's saying that, back then in the current version of history that happened, X, Y, and Z were all could have been prevented, right? So he feels like he could have been the one to lead them to victory if he was the one in charge instead of H. I'll just call him H because I don't want my channel to get demonetized. But then it's like, yeah, you can see how, and then you can see like he really starts to panic because like one part that I really liked was um, when they're about to go through the time wormhole thing, and then Indiana Jones, who is like literally bleeding and shot in the left side of his chest. So that like here, this is where your heart is, right? But like sometimes he's on the verge of death and sometimes he just seems like he's completely fine. And they bring him along with them instead of just leaving him there to die. Like they just bring him on the plane with them because I guess they figure at this point it doesn't matter, or maybe they still need information from him. Anyway, and then I like how Indy starts to trip him out with his words. Like he starts to taunt him as they approach the window. He's like, Archimedes didn't account for intercontinental drift or something, whatever the term is. I think it's like the continents shifting over millennia. It takes a really, really long time, but like for example, every 100 years, maybe the continents shift like a millimeter, something like that, right? So that's something that was a phenomenon that was not discovered or observed during Archimedes' time. And so even if the what's it called? We're just gonna call it the time dial thing, the dial of destiny. Even if it did work, like according to Voller's calculations, it probably, like, his calculations were wrong, is basically what Indy was saying. And he was kind of like taunting him with that. And he really does manage to like trip him out. And then there's a point where Voller's like, no, no, let's abort, let's cancel. Because he really, those words got to him. But then it's like, it's too late by that point because they already get sucked into the Fisher thing. But yeah, like, and then like right before the plane crashes and before Voller's death, you can see that he's really, the expression on his face is like, oh, at this moment he knew. At this moment he knew that he effed up. I love Mads Mikkelsen. I feel like he's perfect. He's the perfect villain, because he has that like intimidating presence, but also his expressions can draw a lot of sympathy from you. He has a great expressive range. That is what I'll say. There were a couple of one-liners that I really, really liked. I was literally like thrashing around in my seat, silently laughing in the theater, which there was only about 10 people in the theater total too, so that was also really comfortable. I love when I get the theater to myself. But there was this one line that I liked near the beginning when they meet in, like, all three of them go to Tangier, and that's where Phoebe, not Phoebe, that's the actress name. That's where Helena is planning to auction off the time dial to a bunch of like wealthy people, wealthy black market clientele, and then both Indiana and Dr. Schmidt, who is Waller in disguise, both of them crash that party, right? Because it's like in the super VIP room of a hotel club, but then, they all gather together in that room, and then there's like, after Waller reveals himself, he's like, oh, do you remember me? And then Indy is like, yeah, I think I kind of remember your face. So are you still a Nazi? And like the delivery of that line was just the best thing ever to me. I want to, like, I'm fantasizing now about if I meet someone, if I come face to face with one of my old enemies, not that I have any enemies, but let's say I just, if I run into someone that I don't particularly care for or I haven't seen in a while, I want to say that to them now. I want to be like, hey, oh my god, how are you, girl? You look so great. So are you still a Nazi? It was that one, and then wait, let me see if I remember. No, there were so many good. I think like this is a testament to Harrison Ford's delivery, right? His deadpan delivery, so good. Yeah, like in the beginning when he's with Baz on the train, and then Baz is like, "Oh my God, like, are we gonna jump? I can't do that, right?" Because they're literally running for their life, and then Indy is like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to take a nap first?" Something like that. I think I'm butchering the line. That was good too. And there was another one. There was so many one-liners. But no, the "Are you still a Nazi?" was definitely my favorite. That was a standout moment in the film for me. I might go see it again. Like, I'm low key, high key considering. Because I watched it in the regular theater this time. Because I wanted to watch it, like, not too late. So the screening was at 5:30 for the regular theater. But I kind of want to see in 4DX now. And I think tomorrow might be the last screening at my local theater. So, yeah. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Like, if I had you guess out of these three movies, which one I would see more than once in theaters, Little Mermaid, Spider-Man, or Indiana Jones, which one would you guess? I don't think you would pick Indiana Jones, but here we are. Um, I'm trying to remember the one other line that I really liked. But it's okay. I'll put it in the comments if I can't recall it now. Are you still a Nazi? I just really want to say that to someone. You know what it was giving? Because it was giving girl fight. Okay, it was giving like a housewives of whatever Atlanta. It was a housewives moment. That line. I do think it was really, really sad that they took his son away from him, though. Like, why? Oh, and then just another thing. When they were diving um, down to that shipwreck, and they only had like 3 minutes worth of oxygen in their scuba gear, their oxygen tank, that was a little bit like too soon for me, okay? Considering the whole Ocean Gate fiasco with the submarine that happened, that the entire world has been enthralled by, just like gripped by this story for the past month. I feel like that entire sequence with them diving underwater and then the Germans like literally attacking them while they're down there, that was a little bit too soon for me. I was like having anxiety during that scene, but it wasn't as bad as I thought. It wasn't like I really thought that they were going to push the limit with them running out of air, but no, it was more just like I think they shot some sort of waterborne missile at them, which they were able to avoid, and they were able to get up to surface fine. But then they came up to the entire crew of the boat being murdered except for the boy. Um, yeah. Okay, I think that's all I have to say. I I really enjoyed the movie. I felt like I was taken aback, but it was what I expected, but then it was also like just a lot more intense than I was prepared for. It was like nonstop train chases, car chases. There's like a tuk-tuk, they're in a tuk-tuk at one point, and then Indy is on a horse. like riding a horse through the subway tunnels of New York City, and it was just crazy. I was kind of, I'm not gonna lie, I was low-key a little bit worried about Harrison Ford during those scenes. Like, oh my God, is he gonna make it through this strenuous activity? But it was good. It came out like they wrapped it up pretty well. I didn't get the watch though. I'm trying to figure out the thing with the watch, because you know when they find the tomb and they uncover like the corpse, and then they find out that he's wearing a modern day watch, but apparently that is supposed to be Voller's watch. But like Voller actually comes to the tomb, like to the gravestone, to the tombstone, not shortly after Indy and Helena first discover it. So like at that point, did Waller have his watch though? Because Archimedes got the watch from his dead body after he crashed onto onto what's that place? Oh my God. It was the Battle of Syracuse. Syracuse, yeah. So like onto the shores of Syracuse. And like that's where Archimedes got the modern day watch, right? Because there's no way that he would have been able to get a watch from the 21st century unless if it wasn't for that time dial thing. So then like he got it off of Jurgen's dead body, and then he buried himself with it when he died. But then like when, so how did Jurgen have it on his hand then when they discovered the tomb? Anyway, that was kind of like mind blown, but I guess that's the nature of time travel, right? Like everything that happened in the past, the even the parts where people from the future travel across time and space, that was already preordained. I think, yeah. There's a few different ways of telling the story of time travel, right? I feel like this one, there's the genre where you go back in time and you do a butterfly effect thing, right? Like you do an action, or you stop something from happening, or you set something in action that didn't happen originally and you change the course of history. But I feel like this movie was not that version. It was more like everything that was going to happen already happened, right? So if even though like even if this group of people discovered a time dial in the 21st century and then they traveled back to that 200 BC, it was already meant to happen, because by the time that they meet Archimedes, he says to them like, you know, Indy says to him, "Oh my God, I have waited so long to meet you," and then Archimedes is like, "No, you were always meant to meet me." So yeah, interesting, very interesting. But then that also means, doesn't that also mean, because like when Indy was trying to convince Helena to leave him there in 200 BC, she was like, "No, you can't do that because you're gonna like fuck up history if you do that, and that's why you need to come back to the present with us. Like we are of the present time, and Archimedes is of his time, and we cannot mix these two together." But wouldn't it be like, if we go by the same logic of Archimedes knowing that he was gonna meet them from the future, wouldn't it already, history would, it was supposed to happen that way, right? Like if Indy really did stay behind, then it would always be meant to play out that way. Anyway, this is why time travel is such a difficult concept to execute successfully in movies, right? But all of that considered, I feel like they did a really, really good job. Okay, I think people on the internet are just really bitter and they have nothing better to do. Like, you have to work with the story that is presented, right? You can't, I feel like you're not really allowed to complain about, if you're not the one writing the script, how can you complain about the story? Like, if you don't like the storyline, then go write your own script, go make your own movie. But then what's the point of like picking apart somebody else's creative direction? This is obviously not something that they just like, this is, I think they went through several different scripts for this, right? Like clearly it's something that they put a lot of thought into. They had to select the right type of story that fits not only with the theme of the series in general, but it also has to really reflect and like mesh well with the current situation of Indiana Jones, which is that he is really aged at this point, right? Like the world is a different place. He does feel, you know, there in a sense, he is kind of like a relic of the past. He feels like he's being left behind. The youth, the young people are looking towards the future, right? They're like, I mean, this movie, the present day of this movie is like 1960s, but so they're like the young people of that time are looking forward to, you know, landing on the moon, all of these new frontiers that the world was exploring at that time, while Indiana Jones has to contend with like his age and is he forgotten? Is there anything left for him to live for with all of the personal problems that happened in his life? So I feel like taking all of that into account, it was a really, really good story. Really good storytelling. Did not skimp on the action at the same time. And yeah, it literally got like a tear or two out of me during some scenes, which is more than I can say for anything else that I watched this summer. So yeah, let me know what you think. If you disagree with me, that's fine. We can disagree, but respectfully, please. And yeah, I'll see you again when the Barbie movie comes out, I guess, in a whole freaking month. Like, but I do think, like, I really do have half a mind to go see this again in 4DX. And especially now that I know the entire story, like, I know all of the jump scares and stuff, so I won't be scared. So that way I'll be able to actually handle the 4DX effects, you know what I mean? Yeah, I'm a sensitive person, okay? And I actually feel like, okay, after I say this, I'm really gonna leave. I actually feel like, you know, I always apologize for this kind of stuff, for being super sensitive when it comes to movies. Like, I know it's Indiana Jones. Everyone sees this as like a Disney family adventure film, but like I said, okay, I was traumatized by that heart scene when I was a kid. And so anything, even though this is not like a real serious violent drama type of movie, it still has those moments in there that are very frightening to me, okay? And I feel like, why am I even apologizing? Why am I talking as if I'm the weird one? I feel like you guys are the weird ones, that you're so desensitized to this stuff that you can just like watch it without being phased. I feel like I'm the normal one, actually, if we're gonna keep it real, that I'm sensitive to this stuff. Because I actually think about it from the headspace of, well, I don't really like, if I saw this in person, if I had to go through something like this or witness this in person, I would definitely be like super freaked out, which I think is the normal response. So why would I be like numb to it if I'm watching it on the big screen, right? Just because obviously I know it's fiction, but that doesn't mean that the like the physical reaction it elicits from me is going to be any different. But yeah, no, there was a lot of people dying in this movie, just willy-nilly, left and right. Don't know if that's just an Indiana Jones thing, but that part that took me off guard. I'm not gonna lie. But hey, I mean, if if you like it, I love it. So anyway, thanks for listening to me ramble again. I'll see you next time. Bye.